a regularly scheduled board business meeting. We will begin our session with a moment of silence and then the pledge led by Mr. Carr. Please stand for a moment of silence.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving to item 1.04. Ms. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Jill Humphreys,
Here.
Ms. Sheila Ujedi,
Here.
Mr. Reed Carr,
Here.
Dr. Charles Santa Cruz,
Here.
Ms. Laurie Wood.
Here.
Mr. President, all board members are present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. At item 2, approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphreys. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will move to the vote. All those in favor of approving this evening's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We move to item 3, 3.01, the Superintendent's report. Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members, let me connect here real quick and Michael. Good evening, governing board members and those in the audience as well as those online. Thanks for being in our meeting this evening. Tonight my presentation is going to focus on the health benchmarks as well as the teacher survey that we did last week. And before I start, I'd like to make sure everybody knows that there isn't a vote tonight for opening up on September 8th hybrid. In the letter I sent out last week and per the approved motion from July 29th, I believe, I was given the ability to move forward with that. And because of time, we needed to make sure that we did move forward. And so on September 8th, we'll be starting with the hybrid model. So let me get to the benchmarks. Again, the first few are just kind of a redo of what we did last week in terms of what the benchmarks are, number of cases, percent positivity, as well as COVID-like illnesses or hospital visits as well. And again, these are the benchmarks set forth by ADHS, and that kind of puts them in 3 categories of minimal, moderate, as well as substantial. And you can see there by the percentages and the number of cases that go in each category. Again, more criteria, what that would look like for schools in each of those areas. Of course, substantial, we would continue online. Minimal to moderate would be a hybrid version. And all of these areas that have a check mark in it are some of the mitigation strategies while there. And then if we're in the green, it's traditional delivery model. And they have 4 out of the, I think, 9 areas marked there. And those are monitor absenteeism, proper ventilation, and hands cleaning, and hand and hygiene and respiratory etiquette. Again, review from last week. Looking at the current Maricopa County data, this was reported on the 20th for the week ending August 2nd. Criteria 1, 77 out of 100,000. It's green and it's trending down. And please note that there's two areas that you can meet in order to meet that benchmark. One of two areas, and that's declining cases or less than 100 cases per 100,000 individuals for 2 consecutive weeks. And of those, in order to meet that benchmark, you had to meet one of the two, and we met the decline in cases. For criteria 2, percent positivity is still in the red area. It has gone down from July 26th to August 2nd, a couple percentage points. It's currently at 8.7. And criteria 3 went down from 5.3 to I believe it's 2.4. It looks like 4% here, but that's actually 2.4. And again, that is trending down. Next, looking at the Gilbert Public School boundary map area. Of course, here's our area, and we are currently in the yellow according to the Maricopa County data. And I'll get to that next. And there it is, just showing from week to week from the last 2 data sets. As you can see, we're trending down as well, and I'll go to that data for the current. Criteria 1, we're at 51.46 per 100,000. That puts us in the yellow. Criteria 2 is 6.14% for positivity, and that's trending down, and that puts us in the yellow. And criteria 3 for hospital visits, that's 0.3%. Again, that area is in the green, and again, that information was updated on August 20th as well. Just a comparison between Maricopa County Department and Arizona Department of Health Services for Maricopa County and the Maricopa County dashboard for our school district for GPS. You can see the two side-by-side comparisons there. For the county, again, for 2 areas, that's green. For GPS, it's yellow. Percent positivity is in the red at 8.7%. For GPS boundaries, it's 6.14%. And hospital visits, it's 2.4% for the entire county, and for GPS, it's 3.0%. Again, both those green. So I just wanted to throw that side-by-side comparison for everybody there.
Dr. McCord,
Yes.
I think they're different. Are the colors different on the Maricopa dashboard versus the state dashboard? Because obviously there's less in the criteria 1 case rate. There's less per 100,000, but it's in the yellow.
Once you get below 50, I believe it's yellow. But remember, for the green, they had 2 areas there you could meet declining cases.
So that's why you're calling it green, because it's
Right.
met that benchmark.
Correct.
And
I
same
had
with,
to look at that twice too.
Okay, and same with the percent positivity. We haven't met the 7% according to the dashboard that was a couple weeks ago, but it is actually in the moderate. If you look at the moderate, what you showed a couple
For
slides ago.
Maricopa County?
No, for
For-
the state. Oh yeah, for Maricopa County for the first, the ADHS-Maricopa County.
Right.
If you look, it says between 5 to 10% is in the
Right.
moderate, even though we're looking for a 7% number.
Yeah. And this is what they coded it as.
Okay,
That's-
I'm just
I totally understand.
confused by the.
Dr. McCord, may I? Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may. Sorry, I think it's Miss Wood that always says Dr. Santa Cruz, if I may. But I think the reason that's still red on the county is because it has not hit it 2 weeks in a row.
That's,
And I think it's also important to recognize on the positivity rate that criteria 1 and criteria 3, let me first say, criteria 1 and criteria 3, the yellow and the go mark, if you will, coincide with the top of the yellow. But in the positivity, the yellow range is 5 to 10%, but the go mark is 7%. So we can be yellow and not be under 7% for 2 weeks.
because it's between 5 and 7, correct?
Correct. So in this case, the red on the county is because the previous week was not lower. So when the new week comes out, that will transition to yellow, but we still need to be under 7% for 2 straight weeks, which we are within GPS for 1 week, but have not been for 2.
Right, and we were at 10 point something percent the week before, I think, in the positivity.
If I remember, on the GPS, we went from 10 to 8 to 6 roughly, but not 2 weeks below that 7.
Yeah. And again, I told you guys I'd update you at each board meeting. That's where we're currently at. For those of you playing governing board bingo at home, this fills the bottom left-hand square. Any other questions on that? I'd like to share with you the teacher survey data. Last week.
Dr. McCord, I have a question.
Yes, please.
If I remember, the original motion was that we would not start until we met the criteria. So between now and when we start is exactly 2 weeks, correct? September 8th?
Yes.
So what happens if we don't meet them?
Then if we don't meet the criteria, then we continue to stay online. I mean, I think that's what we would have to do based on the motion of the governing board.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Teacher survey data. Last Wednesday evening, and I said this at last Tuesday's board meeting, that we needed to survey the teachers to find out what their intentions were when we started on September 8th in the hybrid model. And so teachers were surveyed. There was 2,133 surveys sent out to our certified staff. Of that, 166 certified staff did not respond. I think some of that's because for a couple reasons. We've got some emails saying they didn't respond because they don't feel it's safe. Others, I just don't think they responded. I'm not going to read into those that haven't told us why they haven't responded, but we did receive some emails with my other statement. Of those surveyed, 92% returned their surveys, 1,967. Of that, 92% said they'd return to campus. 8% was go to or stay at Global. Looking at basically the survey questions and how they responded, I am currently assigned as an elementary flex teacher and will return to in-person on September 8th. 40 of them said they would. I'm currently assigned as an elementary flex teacher, but I'm unwilling to return in person despite the listed safety protocols on September 8th. 2 people. I'm currently assigned to a campus and will return in person on September 8th, 1,750. I am currently assigned to a campus but unwilling to return in person despite the listed safety protocols. That was 36. I'm currently assigned to Global but wish to return in person on September 8th. 18 people said they were willing to do that. And I'm currently assigned to Global Academy full-time and wish to remain in this position, and that was 121 people. Again, for a grand total of 1,967. After that, we have put out a survey to our families so we know their intentions about coming back in person or remaining at Global. We're currently tabulating those. That closed yesterday evening, and we have some preliminary but not ready to share that just yet because I want to make sure all the information's accurate. We'll share that at our next board meeting. And so after all of that is determined, OTM will be making sure we have placements in the right area and accommodate those that we can. And for those that we can't, the OTM will have discussions with them about what their intentions are moving forward. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with you and the community, let you know how that survey came out. Other than that, that's my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. We'll now move to item 4, and that is request to speak to the governing board. We have several requests. Would you please play the recorded message? The board may make an open call to the public during a public meeting, subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. to allow individuals to address the public body on an issue within the jurisdiction of the public body. At the conclusion of the open call to the public, individual board members may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board, may ask the staff to review a matter, or may ask a matter to be put on a future agenda. However, members of the board shall not discuss or take legal action on matters raised during the open call to the public unless the matters are properly noticed for discussion and legal action. During the open call, the board requests that speakers refrain from voicing complaints against school personnel or any person connected with the district, as it may impact due process rights. Policy KE, KEB, and KED are provided by the board for disposition of legitimate complaints, including those involving individuals. Forms required for use of these policies can be obtained from the Gilbert Public Schools website. Thank you. And I will apologize in advance. I do not intend to mispronounce your name, but very likely I will. And if I do, please correct me as you reach the microphone. Restate your name so that we have it correct. First speaker will be Matthew Oskowitz, followed by Safa Hermendi, followed by Joe Gusick.
Thank you, sir. I'm here to, I was here last board meeting, and obviously the crowd has been appeased because we don't have that many speakers as we did last time. But one thing I want to do caution is, again, you know, we're planning to open the school up. We still haven't met our criteria yet. Hopefully we will. But the point I want to make is there's three, if history repeats itself, if we look back at history, we had tuberculosis in the late 1800s, we had polio in the 1950s, we had the Spanish flu in the early 1900s, and all those were maintained or retold by severe measures. And I guess I kind of find it a little upsetting as everyone seems to be concerned about the kids getting back to school, which I can appreciate. But we're only talking about a few months here in terms of being safe. We're not talking years or anything like that. We're just talking about, you know, taking a few weeks out and making sure everything is all right before we move forward. And I appreciate the board in terms of them moving forward with opening the school and the safety protocols that have been put in place. I can appreciate that. One of my concerns also is with the, you know, I noticed that on the agenda items is the insurance. So obviously the board is taking it seriously that there is a liability issue that comes with opening up the schools. And I'd recommend moving forward with that insurance just for protection of the school itself in terms of its financial. One of the other concerns I have is I know that we had offered three options to the school district. The flex, the in-person, and the global academy, and we offered that to all the school body. Unfortunately, it seems that we've eliminated the flex for the lower grades, and I have concern with that because that seemed to be an option that was offered. It was presented last week. It's been taken off the table. My concern is I do have a son in that flex thing is now that if he moves to Global Academy, if that's the choice I make, he's going to be behind because Global Academy has their own process and curriculum, and now he's going to be, if he goes to Global Academy, he's going to be behind the ball in terms of what he needs to be finished. So I kind of feel a little jilted the fact that, you know, three options were given, one option was taken away, and now we're trying to scramble to figure out how we're going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Safa?
Good evening, board members. I'm Safar Hamendi. I'm a senior at Gilbert Classical Academy. As you are aware, we are quite concerned with the decision to return back to school on September 8th, a mere 2 weeks away. Although gratefully the number of COVID cases are much lower than the beginning of July, which was around 5,000 cases, we fear a sudden increase in numbers, which is highly likely. However, the greatest concern is returning to school in the first place, so soon, along with the lack of testing. How can we maintain safety and health if we are not going to at the very least, check for symptoms or temperature, or even have COVID testing mandatory before coming to school? At this point, it feels like I have to choose between my health or education, which are two of my main priorities, and I appreciate the social distancing precautions that you have all arranged for the public, and I find it very telling that nearly 5 months into the pandemic, we don't have a virtual option for public comment, especially for students. Myself, I have respiratory issues, and yet I'm here because I feel I must share these concerns with you. How can I feel confident in your decision making when you don't have fully safe mechanisms? I know I'm not alone, and I know that there are hundreds of other students who had to choose their education over their health when they are at risk of catching coronavirus and spreading it around their family members. I shouldn't have to be here to have my voice heard. It should already be recognized that we will lose friends and family if we return so soon. We will lose classmates, teachers, and staff. Once again, I ask for you to reevaluate your decision to return on September 8th, and please consider the surges in positive cases in states that have returned in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Gusick.
Board President, fellow board members, all GPS staff, parents, taxpayers, and last but not least, students. My name is Joe Gusick, and I'm the lovable, slightly annoying American, and I'm the Education Lorex. I'd like to give a shout out to one of the community members. Obviously, this is a time of stress, but it's always nice to have a little bit of fun with the bingo board here. As I speak to the bingo board, maybe we should have a real bingo board and put our real money in it, because there is going to be costs. You saw the cost for this additional insurance. Nobody enjoys the situation that we're all in. I don't enjoy wearing a mask. I don't enjoy having to wash my hands so much. I don't enjoy having to use hand sanitizer. I think I only used it twice in my entire life before COVID. I don't like to be 6 feet away from people. I like to shake people's hands. So what I'd like to share with you is what came out from the CDC just the other day, and it ever changes, and that's part of the problem that we have here. Things keep changing. And it said, preparing K-12 administrators for a safe return to school in the fall of 2020. That's an interesting title. We've already started. So as I did on a post, I want to apologize to the children, to the educators, to the staff, to the superintendent, and to you, the board members. I should have spoke up in March, at the latest April. We knew exactly when that date was to start our schools. It's obvious the CDC didn't know that, because they are in the Northeast and they all start after Labor Day. But one of the things that they say is engage and encourage everyone in the school and the community to practice preventive behaviors. These are the most important actions that we will all support schools' safe reopening and will help them stay open. I ask all community members to agree to rules of the road. We knew what we know, we now know what we need to do. We need to follow a solid PPE strategy, day in and day out. Do not deviate, because I'm sure it's not going to be a nice day if we have to start shutting schools back down again. 2, we need to make sure that we have access to 24-hour testing at least. And personally, if the President of the United States can have rapid testing, then shouldn't we? The President of the United States has 18 people that back up his position. It's a succession plan since 1947. Today, currently, 16 people of those qualify. But in this reality of this day, we all have to do things that the president doesn't have to do. It's no knock on him if it was any other president. So I say, let's have a strong PPE strategy. Let's have that 24-hour testing or better. And when we do open our schools, that we do it successfully and we do it with continuity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Jocelyn Kauser, after Michael Langford, and then Iman Masoud, and finally Sophia Hammer.
Hi there. I heard someone say that there's not as many parents here tonight because we've probably been appeased. I want to assure you that is not the case. That is not the case why there are not as many parents here. We are tired. We are so tired of watching our kids struggle, of feeling like our voices aren't being heard, of feeling like we're being strung along, of watching the goalposts be moved and moved and moved and having no answers for our children when we see them struggling at home. When my neighbors call me and say, what should I do? I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what to do for my own kids. So that is probably why many aren't here tonight. I know that you guys have heard from so many parents over the last weeks pleading to get our kids in school. I know that you've heard all the statistics of the dangers of keeping them at home, of the suicide rates, of the depression, of the academic shortfalls that we're encountering. There's so many things, and I could go over all of that tonight, but instead, I am just here because I want some answers. Parents in our district have decisions to make, and we need to make some decisions this week. I know that there are many that have pulled out. I know there are many that are ready to pull out this week if we don't have a plan or some answers in place. Continuing like we are now is just not an option for many of our kids. I know last week Jill mentioned she doesn't think the kids are behind. They are behind. So many are failing. Kids that have never even gotten less than a B in their lives are failing several classes. There are so many struggles going on right now. And we just feel like the goalpost keeps getting moved. We just don't know exactly quite what we're working for, and that's what we need to know. That's what we're hoping tonight, that we get some solid answers of what this is going to look like. I really just want you to give us a reason to stay. I have 4 kids, 3 of them are still in the school system, and I need you to tell me tonight why I shouldn't pull them tomorrow. Give me a reason to stay. Give me a solid plan of when I can expect that their education will resume. Because what they're getting right now is not the education that Gilbert Public Schools stands for, that they've had in the past, or that they would even be proud of. What they're getting now is just subpar, and I can't, as a mother, sit by and watch it any longer. So I would like to know, what is the plan? What is it going to take? What is this September 21st date? Does that really mean anything, or is that just another goalpost that's going to be moved along the way? I want to know what it's going to take and what our chances are of getting there. I'd also like someone to answer how many students we've lost this year, what that financially is going to look like for our schools next year, and how we're going to move on from there. I know my time is up. Again, I know everybody has a choice. Clearly, there's people that don't feel comfortable coming to school, and I want them to stay home and take advantage of that online option. But for the 92% of the teachers that want to be there and the rest of us that want our kids there, I'm just asking that you honor that choice. Thank you.
Dr. Santa Cruz, if you don't mind, I'd like to clarify something.
Go right ahead.
I just want to clarify my statement from last week. It wasn't that I don't feel like kids need additional help. I just don't want us to label them as having deficits, because we're all in the same boat. Everybody's struggling with this. And what I want is to give our kids a growth mindset that they are capable and competent and that they can overcome these challenges. And that's what I was trying to say last week. My apologies if it sounded different.
Mr. Langford?
Thank you, members of the board. GPS has consistently stated that families have a choice between on-campus instruction and online schooling, but it seems dishonest to say this when Global Academy is not an option for my child or for some other families that we know. Global Academy is not equal to on-campus instruction in the sense that they don't have the same classes offered on Global Academy as they can offer for on-campus instruction. My son is a senior at Highland High School and is in advanced classes, including his capstone courses. He's working towards his STEM diploma, and he's doing all AP classes. He's in line to graduate with both the STEM and AP diploma, which, as far as we know, is the first time that's a student has ever accomplished that at Highland. However, if we chose Global Academy, most of his classes aren't offered on Global Academy. So it means it leaves our family feeling much like the student we heard from earlier from Gilbert Classical. Feels like we're having to choose between his education and our health and safety. We believe that the school district should not yet reopen to on-campus instruction. To provide some context to the numbers we heard earlier, our current COVID case level is higher now than it was when the stay-at-home order was lifted back on May 15th. And after that stay-at-home order was lifted, cases began to skyrocket and Arizona became a coronavirus hotbed, with new cases peaking about 6 weeks later. And coronavirus deaths peaked in mid-July, and nearly 5,000 Arizonans have died from this disease. With all these numbers in mind, it's clear that we should not be reopening at this time. We're primed to make the same mistake again. Using a benchmark of % positive cases is flawed because a significant portion of coronavirus cases go undetected. The number of actual infections is likely much higher, as 40% of people infected show no symptoms. Although young children who are often asymptomatic may be less likely to spread the disease, the same is not true amongst high schoolers, which makes opening secondary schools especially dangerous at this time. Even if we look at the % positive cases tested, it was at the same level in mid-May than it is now. Turns out that it was not safe to reopen our economy then, and it isn't safe to reopen our schools now. There's some additional important data I think that needs to be considered as well, which is that 10 to 20% of coronavirus cases are responsible for 80% of coronavirus transmission. So it doesn't take a lot of people to spread it to a lot of other people. Coronavirus spreads efficiently from people who don't know they are infected. 40% of virus transmission will have taken place before a patient exhibits any symptoms. So this virus can quickly spread before anyone knows about it. And super spreading occurs within indoor congregate settings with poor ventilation, such as our schools. I think, as I'm running out of time, I think it's very important that we have a true and equal online alternative if we're going to pursue with the reopening of on-campus instruction, so that students like my son and others that I'm aware of will be able to pursue their academic plan as they set out and be able to do so safely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, board members. I'm Iman Masood, a senior at Gilbert Classical as well, and I'm here to voice my concerns about reopening schools on September 8th. I acknowledge the precautions you've taken and appreciate them. However, I am concerned that there isn't enough being done for the students of Gilbert. When the possibility of returning to school was brought up, I was expecting for schools to be testing students' temperatures and to have a clear guide of exactly what was going to be happening in schools once we were back. But after reading over the countless amounts of emails, all I know as a student is that students will be separated into 2 groups to minimize the amount of students on campus for 2 weeks. There will be mandatory masks and sanitation systems will be provided. My peers and I are confused at the lack of clarity that has been given to the students of GPS. We request prolonging online learning without the option of flex or in person completely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, board members. I am Sophia Hammer, also a senior at Gilbert Classical Academy. I'm here today to discuss my concerns regarding the recent reopening decisions put in place by the GPS board. Trust me, I want to go back to school. As a senior, I want to make this year count, but not at the expense of my teachers and my peers. I know there's an online option available that students can choose if they don't want to go back. But this online option through Global Academy doesn't offer various classes like band, choir, orchestra, and several language courses. I want to receive a full and complete education, but I don't want to become some kind of national experiment and risk my health by doing so. Choosing between health and education should never be something us students should have to pick between. We almost reached the 3 benchmark. We're on that track put in place. However, Arizona isn't offering teachers or students testing. Arizona isn't testing anyone that goes to school for symptoms or doing temperature checks. Arizona's testing is failing and several tests are on backlog. So why are we rushing to send students and teachers back to school and risking lives when we can't even provide everything I just listed? I don't want to see my teachers have to pick between teaching or leaving the school because they don't want to go back. I am sad to see some of the teachers leaving the job and the school they so dearly love because the district decided to send them back and they don't want to get sick. I don't want to continuously see my peers having to choose between education or health. And I don't want to see my teachers and students dying because our board sent us back too early. I urge you to consider and push back the date, which is just in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our final request. Dr. McCord, anything that you wanted to add? Is there the timeline for our reopening would you articulate that for our audience and for those on live stream?
Timeline for reopening, September 8th would be the beginning of hybrid. That would go for 2 weeks, and for full in-person or online would start September 21st.
Thank you, sir. Now move to item 5.
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Yes, Ms.
Dr. Santa
Ujedi.
Cruz? I would like to have Dr. McCord clarify that is depending on meeting the metrics.
Yes, that is correct, Mrs. Ujedi. That is, if we are meeting the metrics at that time for both September 8th and September 21st, those dates will be a go with those plans implied for those dates.
And that's, like I said, only a recommendation from the governor, but it is something that the health department has recommended.
That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Ujedi, and I believe that is the caveat associated with any date that's proposed is when and if the benchmarks indicate we would then go back.
Dr. Santa Cruz?
Yes.
If I may.
You may.
So I guess, are we saying that we are only considering data accurate if it has been published on one of those dashboards, not if it's on the Arizona Department of Health site? Because those are 2.5 weeks lagging, which I'm fine with. I'm just saying, is that the only official data that we're willing to look at?
That is the official data that we have been looking at. If you as a governing board want to determine something different, I think that'd be another discussion.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving to item 5. Monthly reports. What I'd like to do is take some license here and put item 5.02 ahead of item 5.01. Dr. McCord, any introductory remarks regarding 5.02 School Improvement Bonds Project of 215 to 219, Series 2020 results?
I just would like to turn it over to Ms. Betts from our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, and she will introduce our guests and some good news.
Thank you.
Ms. Betts.
Good evening, Dr. Santa Cruz, Dr. McCord, governing board members.
I would like to introduce both Megan Burke and Bill Davis from Piper Sandler. They are the district's financial advisors, and they will present the very positive results from the recent bond sale. So, Bill, if you want to begin. That's not on.
We have a short report. I'm going to start out.
Sorry, could you speak into the mic a little more?
I'm not
because
sure
we
it's
can't hear
on.
you. I'm not sure it's on.
Thank you. So, as you know, there was a lot of preparation leading up to the bonds. We were very fortunate in July to receive just exceptional attention from the investor public, and I'd like to walk through some of the details with you. As you know, we issued enough bonds to have the project unfunded or proceeds available for projects of just under $40 million. Utilize $40 million of the district's remaining 2015 authorization and $32 million of the 2018 authorization. The sale date was at the end of July. Had maturities from 2023 through and including 2028. Again, one of the real primary reasons that I want to emphasize relative to why we got such an attractive rate was the district's strong bond ratings. And as you can see from this, we had a AA2 from Moody's and the AA- from Standard & Poor's, and that really helps investors understand the district's credit and allows them to be, willing to lend the district money, if you will, at such low rates. The all-in true interest cost, so this is the true interest cost incorporating all expenses of the bond transaction, came in at under 1%, at actually 0.708%, which is the lowest in district history, and we are at just all-time lows, not only in the U.S. Treasury market, but in the municipal market as well. So it's just, that interest rate is the lowest that I've ever seen. I've been around for a long time. Never thought we'd see this day, but it's pretty fantastic. And if you think about it, these dollars are being paid back by the district taxpayers. So both the principal and the interest. And when you can have that interest down at below 1%, it's very inexpensive money. And it allows more flexibility for the district going forward at a much lower tax rate at the same time. So it's just pretty fantastic. Megan's going to talk about the orders received, the volume, the interest from investors. As I mentioned, the all-in TIC is the lowest in history. We had been estimating an interest rate of around 3%, prior to the election and even through, the early part of this year. This interest rate, when you quantify the difference between that estimate and what we ended up with, it's saving the district just under $5 million of interest expense. And over the course of that 23 to 28, that equates to about 3 cents a year on the tax rate, which is pretty significant when you think about it. And again, I think this positions the district very well for the next number of years as you sell the remaining authorization from that 2019 election. So again, that lower interest expense just gives you that much more flexibility as we go into the future, which is all obviously unknown. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, and she's going to kind of walk through the balance of the presentation.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for having us here this evening. As Bill mentioned on the next slide, so in total, we offered $34,345 million in bonds to get proceeds of $40 million, as Bill mentioned. We received orders from investors of $220,775,000. So 6.4 times oversubscription. And why that's important is because it's supply and demand. So the more orders come in, the lower we can reduce that yield. So on this slide, you'll see, as we mentioned, there was maturities 23 through 28. The gray box is, the par amount of bonds that was offered in each one of those maturities. So for instance, in 2023, that amount is $5,850,000. That maturity received investor orders of $37,025,000, which is 6.3 times oversubscribed. So each of the maturities was the same. You received orders from investors such as BlackRock, U.S. Trust Bank of America, Nuveen, J.P. Morgan, Northern Trust, American Family Insurance, Goldman Asset Management, Eaton Vance, Breckenridge Capital. So some really big names were very interested in buying the district's debt. One, because of the credit rating that Bill mentioned. Two, the market is just, interest rates are so low, and they're looking for good, solid Arizona transaction or paper, as we call it. On the following slide, there's a lot of information here, but I think to point out to Bill's to illustrate Bill's point is in the bottom left-hand quadrant. This is the MMD is the municipal market data. This is what we price municipal bonds off of. So this is a range from 1982 to present. So the first year one, that's the range of interest rates from 0 up to 8%, so on and so forth. The orange line is the average. The blue line is current market. So you'll see that we are at all-time interest rate lows. So it was a really great time to enter the market. Ms. Betts planned it perfectly, and the strategy couldn't have worked out better. That was all our prepared remarks, unless
I did tell her to say that. Dr. Santa Cruz, I did have a question. Can you explain the graph that's in the lower right-hand corner on the Treasury movement, recent MMD and U.S. Treasury movement? Can you explain that graph to us, please?
Yeah, so it's inflows and outflows. So as money flows into the municipal market, there's more paper or more money that's being available to purchase municipal debt. So you'll see this is... Oh, I'm sorry. Are you doing on the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes, the bottom right-hand
corner.
corner.
I'm sorry. This is recent MMD and U.S. Treasury movement. So this is MMD rates. You'll see the movement that they move. So the 2-year has gone down 2% from where it started on 7/1/20.
Okay.
Did I explain that correctly? Yeah. The 30-year has moved down basis points. 9 basis points. So
Okay.
it's just, it keeps decreasing.
Okay.
So it was kind of a trend that week
Mhm.
where interest rates were going.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Board members, any questions? The calculated strategy that we discussed prior to this venture worked. Congratulations, Ms. Betts. Mr. Carr?
I'd just like to thank Ms. Betts as they did. I'd also like to thank Bill and Megan. As they indicated, this is a bond issuance, but it's really a culmination of years of work to put the financial records and the reserves in place that resulted in this. So this isn't it's wonderful that we timed it with the market, but even had we timed it with the market, had we not had the last couple of years of work to express our financials and address some of the issues, we would have never realized this. So thank you to all of our staff. And this is a great win for the taxpayer.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Board members, anything else?
Ms. Betts, are you going to speak to these other things then? School improvement bonds, project of 2015 and 2019, or was that all part of this presentation?
Yes, that was part of this presentation. The fact that the 2015 and 2019, those are the authorizations. So November of 2015, we sold the last $8 million of that. And the 2019 authorization, we sold the first $32 million of that.
Okay.
So it's just a result of those combined regarding the total all-in interest costs to our taxpayer.
Okay, thanks. And then are we going to have another presentation by you at some point showing us again how you're planning to spend this and the way that we use this money that's been approved by our voters to maintain our schools and the other things that they've approved it for?
Yes, we did transmit to our bond council that plan, and it is the same as what was presented in May when we asked you to approve the resolution for the bond sale. In addition, we're required by statute to do an M&O override and bond fiscal year update by the end of September, so we will be doing that on the 22nd of September, I think is the board meeting. So
Okay.
we will incorporate all this information in that.
Great, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Bill and Megan, we appreciate your work and your effort related to our bond sale, and we're delighted with the results, as you are, I'm sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Move back to item 5.01, the monthly budget report. Dr. McCord?
I will once again turn it over to Ms. Betts for our monthly budget report.
So again, so just a reminder that this is the first month of fiscal 2021. Again, we are largely not operating in July, so all of our students and teachers came back to school on the 5th of August, so there's very little of transactions really reflected in the financials, but there are some highlights that I did want to go through with you today. So first of all, again, this is the same thing we presented last month, that we are fully in the encumbrance period and actually almost through it now, where during this time frame we do our last payroll runs. We also are waiting for our final property tax revenues, and that we are completing all of the payments of invoices, et cetera, through, I think this Friday is the last day of the encumbrance period. So there will be a lot of activity going on and continuing until we present the AFR, the annual financial report, to you all in early October. Next, again, wanted to talk about the budgeted funds. So the budgeted funds, the adopted budget is reflected, which you approved on June 23rd. Again, this is fiscal year 2021. And then the cash funds, we do have an estimate of the beginning cash balances based upon the June 2020 financials. And again, these all will change as we're paying off invoices and releasing encumbrances. And again, we will share those changes with you when we present the annual financial report in early October. So these are some of the details. So you can see the Maintenance and Operations Fund, which is our largest general fund. You can see that we have an available balance of $30 million right now. So again, in July, we haven't done any payments in the new year for teacher salaries or our school-based salaries. So there's a lot of encumbrance that hasn't been encumbered yet at this point in time. In addition, that $30 million balance does include a contingency balance as well as our other stipends that are paid, et cetera, that are not encumbered. So just wanted to share all of that, but that is reflective of encumbrances associated with salaries and benefits. Again, classroom site fund, the teacher salary, the same conversation that we are not fully encumbered on the teacher salaries at this point in time. Unrestricted capital, we have talked over and over again about the care that we are using to allocate out capital dollars. So we have engaged in several projects with Marcy Taylor as well as Jason Martin, and now with Karen Coleman regarding performing arts needs and Stephen McDowell regarding athletics needs throughout the school system. So we are working actively on those decisions in cabinet. So you can see that we've only approved just under $6 million of spend in unrestricted capital. And then finally, the energy and water savings. That is a requirement that we take money out of M&O and actually put it into the special fund, reflecting a lease that we engaged in back in 2016, I believe. So then that is the fund that we use to pay the debt service or lease payments for that energy performance lease that was adopted and approved in prior years. Any questions on any of those funds? Great, thank you. Federal grants, we've highlighted the Title I. That $3.5 million on the adopted budget did reflect that we were going to carry over 100% of unspent title. There was a significant amount of unspent title due to the shutdown of the school district in early March. So fortunately, due to the federal government decisions, we are allowed to carry over all available unspent dollars, actually in all of our federal funds on this page. And then note too the identification of ESSER. So that is the Elementary School and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund. Jill, that was the acronym. I almost forgot it again. If you recall, our allocation was about $2.3 million. We anticipated spending about $500,000 in 2020. However, with the advent of the enrollment stabilization grant, which we've been talking about a great deal over the last couple of weeks, we anticipate that we will move a lot of those expenses into that enrollment stabilization grant. So we expect to revise the budget in December to reflect that full $2.3 million to be spent in the 2021 school year. Any questions on any of that?
Can you tell me what kinds of things are we planning to spend this 326 ESSER fund on?
So
because you don't have it encumbered at this point.
Right. The allowable spend is any expense associated with COVID-19, any other requirements that we had due to this pandemic. And so right now we're actually going through all of the available funds to determine which expenses we should put in the enrollment stabilization grant, which expenses we should put into ESSER, and whether we have an ability to apply even for the FEMA grant dollars associated. All these are associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and relief from the federal government. So as an example, last year we incurred a great deal of expense in nutrition services and in community schools without having the commensurate revenue. So those types of situations are eligible under the enrollment stabilization grant. Under the ESSER fund, probably we would apply for the expansion of the Florida virtual software to that. Again, information technology has purchased many additional Chromebooks for K-5 as we've gone to more online learning. Additional, all the PPE, the plexiglass in our schools, the additional cleaning materials, the additional custodial work, all of those items are actually appropriate expenditures to put into both the enrollment stabilization grant as well as the ESSER grant.
Would it be something that we could put if we need to hire more staff, for instance, custodial staff, for instance, teachers to cover different needs that we have, and what's our plan for that? And
it's possible for us to do that, but keep in mind that it is an enrollment stabilization grant, so we have been provided a guardrail of 98% of last year's ADM. So this grant, this grant will give us even additional more protection that we've actually budgeted for and planned to spend a certain dollar amount based upon the budget that you all approved in June. So again, any expenditures that were related to COVID directly are eligible, but many of those would have already been budgeted. So it's a means to protect the school district from having budgeted expenditures and making commitments and having the revenues and resources available to still meet those commitments. But yes, as we look into those and determine what our available resources are going to be, we will then look at other strategies associated with adding additional custodians, et cetera. We did authorize 5 additional custodians already to be hired as roving custodians throughout the school district, just as an example, so that expenditure would be eligible. All the training that we did for our teachers to get them trained on the online platform this summer, that would be an eligible expense that could be moved either into ESSER or the enrollment stability grant. you will hear more about that.
That's what I'm wondering. Okay. And then is this something that we have this year to spend? Will this money be available just through 2021, and then if we don't spend it, it will be gone?
The enrollment stability grant is ending. We have to apply for that by the 4th of September, and we will know what our award is on the 40th day, which is September 30th. So we will know what dollar amount we are eligible for the enrollment stability grant, and then we can only apply for expenditures from March 1st of last year, March 1st of fiscal year 20, through December 4th of fiscal year 2021, which is December 4th of 20. And so that's the most constraining of all of the revenue sources, but we also expect it to be the largest dollar amount. So we are trying, and then the ESSER grant is good through September 30th of 2022. It is actually the most flexible of the funding sources that have been provided.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further on that?
Any other questions?
So I guess maybe I'm
Go ahead.
reading in.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. I guess I'm reading into Ms. Wood's questions. Are there opportunities to properly use these funds to further enhance the safety of our students and staff this year? Are there things that we've not been able to do that with these funds we now can and should do?
So we are going through that assessment right now. The biggest concern that is out there is not fully understanding what the enrollment stability grant is. So our understanding and what we presumed is that we would be minimally funded based upon 98% of last year's ADM. What's not clear now is whether we have to apply for that and figure out those expenditures that would go against that. So then once we have that information, and yes, then the $2.3 million could be available to do further enhancements. We have been very careful in Cabinet, though, in all of our decision-making to make sure that we're absolutely providing the N95 masks and face shields to all personnel that want it, that we're adding as many protocols as we can absolutely find to the cleaning associated with all of our schools and our classrooms. So regardless of, I guess, how much was budgeted in the current year under normal circumstances, we've still allocated out significant resources to meet those needs.
Thank you. And I think what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm hearing wrong, is we have taken the steps that we think are appropriate, and I wouldn't leave out the fact that we're also added air filters to the duct system, because I think we get a lot of questions from teachers about the ventilation system. But what I'm hearing is we may have these additional funds. We don't yet know the flexibility of them. So yes, we're pursuing more options, but we're waiting to make sure that we can spend those funds legally on those options. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. And we have made obligations to all of our staff for the current year, so we want to make sure that we have the revenues associated with being able to continue to pay them. So that has been the focus of our work over the last 2 weeks. But to answer that question as well, we're still investigating what can we better do for our bands and orchestras to provide safety for those students. As an example, Karen Coleman's been working very, very hard at figuring out, well, can we get a mask for an instrument as an example? So she's provided that information to us today. We are getting they call it a Mystic Mint or something, that is a disinfectant that can be sprayed down horns, etc. And we are also authorizing to buy instruments so that instruments don't have to be shared, just as an example with our students across the school district. You talked about the ventilation. We have made decisions about ventilation and increasing the airflow. even though we know it's going to increase our utility costs, but we've still done that. We are also still investigating the electrostatic filtration. We haven't gone there yet, but we are investigating that. Albert and I have a meeting this week to further investigate that, presenting all of this to Cabinet for approval. And I'm, at this point in time, I think we in finance are just trying to figure out how much money are we going to get from the Enrollment Stability Grant. And then we do know that at 98%, getting to 98% of last year, we would have to reduce our budget by about $2 million that you adopted in June. So we're looking at all those things and trying to make the best decisions on using all the funds. In addition, we spent a lot of time today with various organizations throughout Arizona talking about another fund, which is the FEMA Emergency Fund. So we are investigating to find out whether Gilbert is eligible for that as well. And that would be a certain dollar amount that we would know pretty quickly. So we're continuing to maximize our revenue resources, figure out what the best thing is to do to provide the safety protocols for all of our staff and students so that we can move forward this year in Gilbert.
One more question, Dr.
Go ahead.
Sanders. So I guess this does reflect at some level that we do have enrollment decline, as we know, and that we are concerned about that. And also then, I just wanted to ask one more question. You mentioned it already, but when will we know the exact dollar amount from the enrollment stabilization
So
grant?
they're basing the allocation on the 40th day, and at Gilbert, our 40th day is September 30th.
So that's still quite a ways away. Will you have any further updates or ideas or estimates before then?
We will, because the application's due on September 4th, so we are receiving guidance next week from the state on how to estimate what our allocation will be. And so based upon that estimate, that will be what we'll apply for, and then we will figure out the expenditures that would be eligible under that.
Okay. Thank you.
May I just follow up on her question? Obviously, our funding is based off of ADM, which is a calculated number based on a number of variables, the driver being the number of students. But correct me if I'm wrong, part of the issue that we're addressing is the fact that the online student, which all of our students are right now, are funded at 0.9 of the ADM. So when the mere fact that we're online decreases our ADM. So the bulk of our change in budget is that's why we have the equalization funding. That's the theory behind the equalization funding, is to say, hey, we know that you're being funded less under the state formula, but we're going to make that up because we know that, from the governor's office, we told you to be online.
That's correct.
Okay.
Is it 0.9 or 0.95?
Well, a full-time online, if you average it, it's 0.9, so full-time online is 95% and part-time is 85%.
Okay.
Okay?
Additional questions? Go ahead, Ms. Betts.
So this next is just a summary of the state grants. So the classroom site performance pay, obviously we won't pay that until December. And then instructional improvement, that $172,000 is reflective of how we spent, how we funded the expenditure of training all of our teachers in July to be prepared for the online platform at the start of school. These are our enterprise funds. So these two funds are expected to provide the revenues to support their spend. So these, the estimated resources have been reduced significantly. So just a simple piece of information. Normally at this time, Nutrition Services is providing 20,000 meals a day. And to date, we've only provided, and it's actually increased to that, 2,000 meals per day. So there's a great deal, a significant amount of revenue loss in Nutrition Services. In community school, again, we've been shut down with all of our rentals, though Jared Ryan has operated some VIK programs during the summer. The revenues are still significantly under what was received in the past. So even under the enrollment stability grant, the consideration of loss of revenue is also an allowable expense. So it does provide us some opportunities to make sure that we remain whole going through 2021. And these are just some minor little funds that we have generally. I just wanted to bring your attention to the unemployment insurance. We have not taken unemployment insurance out of our payroll. The district pays for it, but it normally is deducted out of our payroll processing. We are beginning that again to figure out what is the appropriate percentage that we should pull out of payroll to make sure that we have enough money to handle any unemployment requests throughout 2021. So you may see some revenues posted there in the future. Any questions on that?
Are you going to let us know or let the teachers know? How do you let them know about that, what that will be?
So it doesn't hit them. It does. It's a district expense.
Okay.
So it's not. It doesn't. It's just that we have to account for it, and it goes through payroll so that we can have a means by which we're collecting the revenues. So it's definitely a district expense.
Okay.
Just like our providing of medical benefits.
Okay, thank you.
These are the school student-based funds. And then finally, the bond and debt service fund. So a couple of things. Over the last couple of days, staff in finance has gone through these at a great deal of detail, because we have sold off the final authorization for 2015, and we've sold the first group of bonds for the new authorization of 2019. I'm going to skip this and go right into the bond fund projects year to date. So you can see that we're showing just over $90 million of bonds spent to date. So we are going back and reconciling all of that. We had an authorization of $98 million. So $8 million was authorized that we sold. We just sold and completed. So there are some issues with cost of issuance that we've gone through and corrected now over the last couple of days. So you'll see some changes to this schedule. The other thing is that we will then be presenting to you two financial reports, one for Fund 631, which represents the 2015 authorization, that $98 million, and we are moving towards Fund 630 to make sure that we're keeping track of what we committed to in 2015 versus what we've committed to in 2019. So we will point that out to you as we get into the spending of these new bond proceeds. Any questions on that? Okay, great. That's all I have. That was enough.
Thank you, Ms. Betts.
Well, thank you for that.
Anything else? Ms.
I just
Embry?
wanted to say thank you for that great report. I mean, that was very in-depth, and we learned a lot, so thank you.
And again, thank you and congratulations for the strategy on the bond sale and your efforts and your team's efforts on behalf of the district as we move through. Anything else, board members? Seeing nothing else, then we'll move to item 6, the consent agenda items. And we have an opportunity for items to be considered, discussed, or direction for possible approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jettie. Any discussion?
I had one item I just wanted to point out. I just thought it was very generous of the Larry Fitzgerald Foundation to donate a generous sum of $10,000 to Canyon Valley School. I thought that deserved recognition, that's a school that can really use that support. So thank you to the Larry Fitzgerald Foundation for that generous donation.
Thank you. Anything else? Seeing none, then we'll vote on the consent agenda items. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Move to item 7, action items for consideration, discussion, and possible approval. Item 7.01, Arizona Risk Retention Trust COVID-19 endorsement. Dr. McCord?
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. As we've mentioned in the past, we'll be asking for your approval of the Arizona Risk Retention Trust COVID-19 insurance policy related to COVID-19. This will protect us as a school district from any lawsuits associated with COVID-19. And Ms. Betts is here to talk to you about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just to begin, we are recommending approval of purchasing the COVID-19 special endorsement offered by the Risk Retention Trust. They're in the Risk Retention Trust as part of our normal liability insurance. Any protection due to a transmission or an issue associated with COVID-19 would not be covered. The Risk Retention Trust was not able to find reinsurers that would cover that, and so we felt, and as a board member, felt it was too much at risk to place the Risk Retention Trust under that. However, staff, along with the trust board, came up with a recommendation to set aside $25 million to provide coverage to school districts and community colleges throughout Arizona. So that's what this endorsement is about. So to get into some of the details, conditions for eligibility. So first, GPS must utilize either an acknowledgement and disclosure form or a waiver, release, and assumption of risk form. So we are making the recommendation that we will use the parent guardian acknowledgement and disclosure form, asking parents to sign that they understand that we're in a pandemic and all those various things. And then we did provide the parent acknowledgement disclosure form on the agenda item. We are making a recommendation, however, that the waiver and release form be used for all of our contractors that come on site. Anybody that we do business for that might be a consultant or somebody doing work on our school building. So we are going to adopt that as part of our purchasing protocols moving forward this year. In addition, we need to make a good faith effort to implement a reopening plan, which we have done, and they're not collecting that. The Risk Retention Trust is not collecting that. They just need to know that we have one. And then, of course, this endorsement is subject to all the other rules and regulations regarding all the other insurance coverages associated with the Risk Retention Trust. So limits of liabilities, you can see that it'll be $1 million each occurrence. There could be more than one claimant. So it is $10,000 in indemnity coverage per claimant. And then a $2 million annual aggregate limit for Gilbert Public Schools. So we are covered up to $2 million. And then statewide, it's a $25 million aggregate limit. So cost for Gilbert Public Schools, as one of the larger school districts in Arizona, will be $150,000 from July 1st through June 30, provided that we purchase the insurance by the 15th of September, which by approving it tonight, we will meet that. And so then after September 15th, the coverage would commence at the date of acceptance. So the deductibles, if we adopted a waiver and release form for all of our parents and students, it would be a $0 deductible. We opted to accept the $10,000 deductible and go with the disclosure and acknowledgement form for all of our parents. If there is no waiver, release, or assumption of risk form, or no or an acknowledgement form, if there's a claimant that comes forward and did not sign either of these, which is possible because we are not requiring the signing of the acknowledgement form in order to access in-person school, then there would be a $20,000 deductible for each occurrence. Before I go any further, is there any questions on any of that? Okay, great.
I have
go
one
ahead.
question, Ms. Betts.
Mm-hmm.
If, considering that we have a state with a lot of districts and 1 million students, if the Risk Retention Trust goes through the $25 million, that they have set aside for this purpose, will that then be on the districts to pay any further liabilities?
It will be.
Okay.
It will be. The only thing I would say about that is that it would be a very difficult thing for anyone to prove first that the transmission of the virus occurred on school grounds, and secondarily that the district was negligent in that transmission. So just by virtue of the difficulty, there's some intrinsic protections there. We are still following, as a risk retention trust board, what's happening at the federal government, seeing if they are going to at least legislatively indicate that schools throughout the nation are exempt from being sued over the transmission of COVID. And it's also on the radar for the Arizona State Legislature as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So why doesn't existing liability coverage protect GPS? Well, that was one of the things I mentioned about the reinsurance.
Miss Bat,
Yes.
yeah, I'm sorry, you may be going to cover this later, as far as what our requirements are concerned, but what about things like masks and things? Is that part of this?
And I think the assessment, I would say yes to that. The assessment, the requirement that we have a reopening plan will be very key in the coverage provided by the Risk Retention Trust. And as part of our reopening plan, we have included the requirement to wear masks. Again, it very well could be, Ms. Ugetti, just regarding the efforts that the school district has made to protect staff and students from the transmission. Yes, that would be very related to that.
Thank you.
You bet. And then finally, the biggest concern of the Risk Retention Trust was the reinsurers, that there would be no protection for them in the event of multiple COVID-related claims. And so they felt that it was important that we have a cap on the amount of insurance or the amount of coverage that would be available. And then finally, why is a waiver or acknowledgement form required? So again, many discussions occurred regarding this particular requirement. Is it really worth it to have people sign it? Does it make a difference? Generally speaking, juries in Arizona may consider a COVID-19 claim the fact that there could be respective fault associated with the school district and or the claimant. And so I think across all the discussions that I have personally had with all my peers as well as the fellow trust board members, it seems prudent that we should engage in this insurance endorsement and purchase it for the following fiscal school year, the following school year. That's all I have.
Board members, any additional questions, commentary? Ms. Wood?
So can we use the ESSER funds probably for this?
We actually can. Actually, I think it's the enrollment stabilization grant. This is an eligible expense for the enrollment stabilization grant.
Okay, thanks. I guess one last thing. How are we planning to offer this, the waiver or the acknowledgement form to families as we prepare to go back to school?
We'll be sending that out when we get prepared for September 8th and bringing everybody back if that's, that's what we're planning on as of today, unless the metrics say something different. But we'll be sending that out with them with information so they can acknowledge that. And we will be looking, and I don't think we're going to put it online in terms of on any kind of enrollment, but making sure that they have the link, and we'll continue to remind them. And what that'll do is that'll dump into a spreadsheet so we know exactly who has signed a form in case something has come up in terms of any kind of litigation related to that. We'll know exactly who has signed off on that.
We did verify with the Risk Retention Trust that electronic signatures or some sort of electronic means verifying completion of the form would be acceptable. So we've opted to, as Dr. McCord indicated, opted to try to do it electronically versus in paper form.
Seems like that would be something that we would want to have as much as we can, as far as, first of all, just, I think the acknowledgement in general that there is COVID, we're still in the middle of COVID, that coming to school in person, there are inherent risks at some level. So I don't think that that would be a bad thing for all of our parents to see and have the opportunity to sign. So I would hope that we find a way that, to make that happen.
We did include it when Mr. Ryan was creating the registration process for the in-person online supports. He did add that to his email, encouraging all of the parents to please register their children. And we did receive over 500 500 parents already that did complete the form.
And so will that be in effect through when they are back at school as well?
It will be.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? It is possible that a parent would be signing more than one of these, let's say a student returning to the school setting and involved in athletics.
We need to have one acknowledgement per student, but a student that's engaged in athletics would not have to have it signed again. It would be covering all of their access to the school building.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Betts. We'll move to item 7.02. And that is discussion and possible action regarding the suspension of board policy.
Do we need to vote on this? Or we just have a presentation on the
Excuse me, yes.
endorsement?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. We have 7.01. I was ahead of myself. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the use of the risk retention form for COVID-19 endorsement.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there a second?
Pay the, I was going to say, and add pay the, sorry.
And approve the expenditure of
Yes,
the
yes,
100
thank you.
the premium. Thank you. So if I can correct that motion, I move that we approve the payment of the premium and the use of the risk retention forms.
A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Any further discussion? I apologize for getting ahead of myself, board members. All those in favor of approving item 7.01, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move to item 7.02. And Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. 7.02, we're asking for discussion and possible action regarding the suspension of governing board policy BGB, policy adoption related to a first and second reading of new board policy ACA and ACA-R, which is regulation, sexual harassment, and policy ACAA and ACAA-R regulation, Title IX, sexual harassment. The reason why we're asking for this is because this is extremely time-sensitive information that we need to have on our policy books as soon as possible. This is information that came down and was recently put into policy form by ASBA, of course, with Udall Shumway also weighing in on that as well. I believe Dr. Meyer and Mr. McIntosh have had conversations with you related to this in terms of the intricacies of the policy.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. You have heard the rationale. 7.02, is there a motion before we open for discussion?
I move that we suspend policy BGB, policy adoption related to the first and second reading of new board policy ACA, ACR, and sexual harassment and policy ACAA, ACAAR. Title IX, sexual harassment.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Uggetti. It's been moved and seconded. Any commentary? I think all of us received individual information from Dr. Myers and Mr. McIntosh.
Dr. Santa Cruz, just one clarification.
Yes.
I don't believe that we typically approve as a board the regulations. We approve only the policies that govern those regulations.
Correct.
Okay, I'll amend my motion, remove the regulations.
So are you amending that then?
Yes, I just amend my motion to remove the regulations, just the policy ACA and policy ACAA.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Ms. Uggetti, do you accept that?
I'll amend my second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, item 7.02 is before you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Motion carries. Ms. Uggetti, was that an aye?
It was.
Thank you, I didn't hear it. Motion carries 5-0. Item 7.03, discussion and possible action to revise policy ACA/R regulation, sexual harassment. Dr. McCord?
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz, governing board members. We have policy ACA before you, and I'm sure it'll get amended regarding the regulation when there's a discussion. We also have Mr. McIntosh and Dr. Meyer here to answer any questions related to 7.03 and 7.04.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. Item 7.03, is there a motion?
I move that we adopt policy ACA, sexual harassment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any discussion? No discussion? Mr. Carr?
Just really related, I think Dr. McCord explained, I think this is only the second time that I recall that I've been on the board that we've suspended a first and second read. We don't like to do that. We owe it to our public that they're aware of policy changes. And as was stated, the reason for supporting that and this policy change is to comply with a deadline required by the EOC, if I remember correctly, but by federal regulators. So apologize to our public, but this was not brought to us in time to address it under the normal process.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. And acknowledging that this particular policy, Dr. Meyer and Mr. McIntosh, is time sensitive, and so we had to move quickly. And thus, as Mr. Carr noticed, we are abridging the typical process so that we can get the policy into the books. Anything else? Seeing no further discussion, then you have item 7.03 in front of you. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 7.04, discussion and possible action to revise policy ACAA. Dr. McCord?
Same as the last item, again, time sensitive, and Dr. Meyer and Mr. McIntosh are here to answer any questions.
Those two are associated and closely related, so is there a motion?
I move that we revise policy ACAA, Title IX, sexual harassment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Ms. Uggetti, Mr. Carr, thank you. Discussion? Again, we have had the opportunity to review with staff, so we will go ahead. No other discussion. Item 7.04 is in front of us. Let's take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 8, 8.01 is request for future items on the agenda. If that isn't something you would like at this point, please make contact with Dr. McCord or Ms. Wilson and let your thoughts be known there. We'll move to item 9, board committees and reports. 9.01, Gilbert Education Foundation, Ms. Humphreys.
I don't really have anything to report this evening. I did want to use my point of personal privilege just to thank all of our teachers for all their hard work and our students, because it's both students, families, and teachers working hard, and I know it's a really difficult circumstance, and we hope things will get better. I think that Arizona is doing the right things to bring down the spread of the virus, and today's report was pretty positive, so let's just keep working on that.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Item 9.02, City of Mesa Liaison, Ms. Wood.
I spoke with Mr. Thompson today and just told him about the plan moving forward to reopen with hybrid on September 8th. He was supportive of that. And also just talked about the City of Mesa. They're slowly also trying to begin opening per guidelines by the governor and as things are allowed in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Town of Gilbert Liaison and Finance Audit Committee, 9.03, 9.04. Mr. Carr.
Nothing to report from the town of Gilbert. The Finance Audit Committee held its meeting virtually. We couldn't meet. We didn't meet or better said, we had a briefing that came from the finance staff, something that we wanted to do to approach it since these times are a little bit unprecedented. And we wanted to move forward and make sure that we had the information.
Thank you, sir. Item 9.05, Insurance Trust Representative, Ms. Ugetti.
I don't have anything to report right now.
Thank you. And item 9.06, Legislative Representative, and I don't have anything further to report. Item 10, meeting dates, 10.01, Dr. McCord.
Thank you, Dr. Santa Cruz. Governing board members, we have a work study and brief board meeting, business meeting next Tuesday. So I think that is that 3 Tuesdays in a row. And
I think it's 4.
Is it 4?
It's 4.
Well, that's good. So we have that next Tuesday, 6 o'clock. September 15th, Board Policy Committee, and September 22nd, a Board Business Meeting.
Thank you, sir. We are at item 11. Item 11.01, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Humphreys. Is there a second?
I wanted to make that motion just so I could vote against it and help somebody with their bingo game, but
Feel free to offer a substitute motion, Mr. Clerk.
we can move forward. I'll second it.
There's a second. And there will be no discussion. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. 5-0, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you for your attendance this evening, staff and community members, and all those who have watched on live stream. Have a good evening.